Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Walker, the manager of athlete development here at USA Volleyball. And today I'm privileged to be joined by Hudson Bates. And he's going to be here to share with us a little bit about a couple of topics based off of his coaching and playing experience. So, if you're not familiar with Hudson's background, currently he's the associate head coach and recruiting coordinator at The Ohio State. And he has been involved in our NTDP high performance training program for a number of years. But the fun fact about Hudson as well is he had an illustrious career, not only indoor, but also on the beach side. So we're going to probe a little bit of his knowledge and his advice about what it looks like to make that transition from an indoor to a beach player. So we'll go ahead and start out with that topic. So first question for you here. What made you decide, hey, I want to transition into beach play?
Yeah, it was not that big of a transition for me because it was always part of my DNA. Like, ever since I was a little kid, I was the guy on the team that was always organizing open gyms, always trying to find ways to get more reps. So when I was growing up, it was like, hey, can I find 11 other guys to go play in the gym, or can I find 3 more guys to go to the park and jump on the sand court? And so it was obviously much more easier to find 3 more guys. So I started playing a little bit of beach when I was in high school and, got my butt kicked by all the old guys that we would go out and play tournaments against. And then as I was in college, my family moved to Florida. And so that's when I really got my beach game upgraded. It was awesome. I would go home during summer break. I would play as much as I could. I would work construction. I would go straight from construction website site to go and play beach for 2 to 3 hours every day. And then when I got to that point in my career later on where I was not invited back to the national team gym because I was just not at that level, it was an easy transition for me to go and just dive all in on the beach side. And that's when I started having more success and getting a little bit more better partnerships, better coaching. All that stuff was a pretty smooth transition for me because I always made it a point, like, I can't always get indoor reps, but there's a way that I can get reps. So I just want to go find a way to play.
I love that perspective. It's just such a grassroots perspective of saying, hey, if you have the opportunity, grab another person, go find a beach to play on, go find some sand, go play on the grass, right? But start building that rapport of what it means to play with a partner versus play with full 6 on the court.
Right.
So as you think about that partnership and how you cultivated finding a partner over the years and expanding kind of your competitive duos, so to say, what was the process that helped you find success in finding a good beach partner?
Yeah, I was in a tough spot because I was kind of a weekend warrior where I lived on the East Coast. There was a handful of high level players, but I would have to travel 2 or 3 hours to get a good training session with them. So that would happen maybe once a week. But it was really hard for me to break into the guys that were full-time AVP training out in California. It happened later on in my career, but the way I got onto the tour was another former college teammate. Like, we worked our way through all the qualifiers for about 2 years. Finally became main draw for a couple of years, and then he big timed me and went off and got a new partner, and so that kind of left me hanging. When I was hanging, I made it a point to go out to California for a couple months and just live out there and play with a bunch of different guys. I found a couple good defenders and stuck with one for a season, and then stuck with another one for about 3 more seasons. So it's tough. It's tough to, I think, be in that situation where you're just so far removed from the training atmosphere. But again, it was just my desire, and that's one thing that I always encourage athletes to just be creative. Don't use difficult times as an excuse not to get reps, not to go play, but find ways to and be innovative and go make it happen. Because at the end of the day, if you wait on parents, if you wait on coaches to make you successful, you're going to be sitting waiting a long time. And so you take initiative and you go find ways to make it happen and just be creative and take chances. Good things happen. And that was maybe one of, like, I'm looking back and I'm listing regrets in my career. One could be that I didn't make that move out to California. And so I actually just had the opportunity to take the U19 beach national team over to China, and we had an awesome tournament. And my follow-up phone calls on a couple of those guys is like, I don't think you realize how good you are. Like, when are you going to make the decision to dive all in and go out to California? And so I'm still trying to push them there. There's a couple that are dedicated to beach only, but they're not living in California yet. And I want them, because those guys, they could be future Olympians, but I think you have to make that commitment. The sooner the better.
Absolutely. So, based off of your experience coaching the beach team, what are the biggest things that you're seeing that you wish you could give advice to current athletes who are getting into the beach scene when it comes to playing success, when it comes to moving to the next level? What have you been seeing at that level?
One of the things that's trending right now is just how creative the offenses are at the higher levels. And I think sometimes athletes get a little wrapped up in that. They want to run these spread, complicated offenses before they really establish the fundamentals and the basics. And so I just encourage my athletes, like, let's just be good at the basics. And then every now and then we'll pepper in something fun to be creative. But I think we get distracted by the glitter and the nuances a little bit too much, instead of just being more reliable and confident in like the simple things.
Absolutely. So, the athletes that you got the chance to coach that you think could turn into future Olympians, what do you think is going to take them there?
It's tough on the men's side. It's really tough because we don't have NCAA beach. So for a couple of those guys who are going to play indoor in college, it's going to take them doing what I did every winter break. Go play beach. Every summer break, play as much beach as you can. Just use opportunities when you're outside the indoor gym or outside the confines of this is your indoor season. Like, just find ways to play as much beach as you can. And then as your indoor career starts to wane, or you start to become an upperclassman, start doing tournaments, getting competitive tournaments. Or when I was coming up and not playing in AVPs yet, there was a local guy who was going around and playing AVP, and he was like, yeah, I'm an AVP player. Come to find out, I think he only qualified like once or twice, but he was committed to just like putting himself out there and getting the experience of those tournaments. And so I think starting that early is going to be really important for their development.
Yeah. How do beach players navigate what coaching looks like on that end, especially in the absence of something like a collegiate program for the men?
Right. It's progressed a lot since I played. There was a couple of really good, well-known coaches. You had Jose Loyola that was out there coaching a couple teams, and other guys that were coaching, but not very many teams had a full-time coach dedicated to them. Now that's more of the norm, but it's still like, if you're not consistently winning, it's hard to hire a full-time coach. And most of those coaches nowadays are just doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're dedicating a lot of time. um, so it is incredibly valuable, because when I was coming up, we just had to think of drills that we could do, and we didn't have people to feed balls. So you had to like be creative in your structure of practice. I think having a coach there is incredibly valuable, even if it's not like a super highbrow experienced coach. Having someone there just to see the game from a different perspective, give input based on their lens, and be able to, you know, put a couple balls in for you, it makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. So, based off of your experience moving from indoor to beach, what were the biggest surprises, both failures, successes in making that transition?
Yeah, I always had benchmarks for my career. A big goal of mine as I got into college was I wanted to make the national team. I wanted to be on a travel roster, and I gave myself a benchmark of, if I'm in that gym for 2 or 3 years and I don't get picked for a roster, I think it's a good sign that I need to move on to something else. And in the back of my mind, I always had beach to fall back on. And I hope that we get to the point where there's more guys that are choosing. I'm diving all in on beach. But I think it is important to have those benchmarks throughout your career. I had them in college. I had them play professionally overseas. I had them with the beach thing. Like, if I had tried beach and struggled to make it out of the qualifiers for 4 or 5 years, that would be a good sign for me. Like, maybe let's just move on to something else. You're like, still do it, but maybe not dive and commit as much time and resources as when you're getting the feedback of winning tournaments, or qualifying regularly, or whatever it is that's giving you that positive feedback. That was kind of how I evaluated my career and what steps I needed to take next.
Yeah, absolutely. So, is there anything else that you would say to young beach athletes as they think about progression in their career?
I think it's hard to dedicate one or the other. On the men's side, I think it's really hard because we don't have that light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to NCAA beach. So there's a little bit of it where it's like you're going to get out what you put in. You are responsible for everything that comes with being a professional athlete, and you have to really find ways to cultivate that atmosphere for yourself. But I don't want to sit here and tell people you need to dive one way or the other. I think there's a lot of benefits, like especially depending on position wise. Like if you're an outside hitter, playing beach is going to develop every aspect of your game because it's every aspect of the game that you use indoor. If you're a middle blocker, like maybe you don't need to pass and set great, but the more beach you play, the better you're going to get at those two skills. And that is important during some of those chaotic rallies. If you're a setter, there's some coaches out there that are like, no, I don't want my setter playing beach because it's going to slow down their hands. And I'm like, you don't have to change the way you set on the beach. As long as it's not a double, it's not a double. If you're a good indoor setter, you can set the same exact way. A great example of that was one of the guys in the U19, Caleb Blanchett, great indoor setter, sets the same exact way on the beach, and he's a phenomenal second contactor. So I think there's just so many benefits of doing both. And then at some point in your career, you will probably have to make a choice. And when you have to make that choice, I think if it's neck and neck, then you got to look for your resources, look to mentors, look to coaches, look to teammates, look to people that have had to go through that process before, and ask a lot of questions and try and figure out what's going to be the best path for you.
I think that's a really critical piece of advice is you're not alone in it, right? You just have to be looking for where you can find that support because it's not as structured
Right.
as you might see with the indoor game.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of me that loved that about it. Indoor, depending on which programs you play for and come up through, it is very structured. And for me, it was like a mental relief to go and play beach. And yes, I was still playing volleyball, but I was just playing. I was enjoying it so much more. Towards the end of my indoor career, one of the reasons I loved indoor was because of the team culture aspect. And then when I started playing professionally overseas, that's gone. It's all transactional. What can you do for me now? What are your stats? How are you contributing to the team? It's not so much about, how's the team doing? How is the team as a unit? In the beach, it's much more easier to cultivate that team unity because it's you and one other dude. And so you're spending a lot of time together on the road. You're figuring out personalities, you're figuring out gameplay. But I love that aspect of all the sports that I did when I was growing up. And I think that's one of the reasons why playing professionally just wasn't for me on the indoor side. But I loved the challenge of playing professionally on the beach side, partially because of less structure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how did you cultivate the relationship with your partners? Because you're talking about you spend a lot of time with them,
Right.
with the travel, with kind of training. So that relationship is a key piece of your performance.
Yeah. I had 4 like AVP, like pretty sustainable partners. The first one was really easy because we came up playing together in college and we trained on the beach all throughout a bunch of those years. And it was easy. We just understood what the other person needed. And switching over to different partners, that was like the chunk that you had to figure out really early. Like the first month is figuring out on the court, what do you need in different situations? A lot of slow practices, a lot of feedback, a lot of talking. Um, and then the off court stuff just kind of happens more naturally. You're on road trips together, you're staying in hotel rooms together or friends' couches together. You're just trying to make it work. But I would say that the off court relationship just happens really naturally. And it so much of it just comes down to personality. Like, are you the person that wants to put yourself out there and be vulnerable, ask questions and really get to know what someone else is about? Like, why are they dedicating so much time to beach? What's their motivation? What are their goals? And figuring having some of those important conversations, maybe after you figure out the on court stuff, is really valuable. But it is a challenge. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes younger guys struggle with is having those more meaningful conversations. I certainly struggled with it. At times there was one partner that only lasted for one AVP season because we just didn't dedicate enough time to that off court connection.
Yeah, I love that. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Hudson. Appreciated being able to pick your mind on wisdom on both the beach and how you deal with disappointment.
Cool. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks.